All right, welcome to Math 150 Quantitative Reasoning. In this first video, we are going to begin with one of the most important ideas in this entire course, and that is how to reason carefully about claims that people make. So every day you encounter things like advertisements, headlines, statistics, political statements, social media posts, and even opinions. The goal of logic is not to tell you what to believe. The goal is to help you determine whether the reasons being offered actually support the conclusion that someone wants you to accept. Okay, so first of all, I want to begin with the terms and definitions. So let's begin with the language on this sheet. Logic is the study of the methods and principles of reasoning. In other words, logic asks us whether our reasoning actually works. An argument is a set of premises offered to support a conclusion. Notice that in logic, an argument does not mean that two people are yelling at each other, which is what most people believe when they're like, well, I don't want to argue with you, or we are not arguing about this, right? Most people use those terms and they don't understand that in logic, a set of premises are being offered to support a conclusion, which is counter to what people typically understand an argument is. So, is an argument good out in public? No, because of the way people perceive the word argument, the way that they're taught the term means, juxtaposed to what the term argument actually means. An argument is actually a healthy thing, and so we need to normalize that making an argument is sufficient enough and should be sufficient enough in human communication. Notice again, notice that because it's very, very important. An argument has structure. Now, we have one or more reasons, and those reasons are being used to support some claim. That's essentially what an argument is. A premise is a fact or an assumption offered as evidence in an argument. A conclusion is the claim that premise or premises are intended to support. And then finally, a fallacy is an argument in which the conclusion is not well supported by the premises. Another way of saying a fallacy is a deceptive argument. It's used to deceive you. It's used to make you not believe the truth. That's what a fallacy is. Okay. But the key idea here is this: evidence and conclusions are not the same thing. Okay. Evidence and conclusions are not the same thing. You can give evidence of something, but that doesn't mean that the conclusion follows logically. Okay. All right. So let's begin with example number one. Identify the structure of an argument. The campaign advertisement states or says that most voters support the proposed curfew. Therefore, the curfew is the best way to reduce crime. Now, we need to identify the premise and the conclusion. Let's start with the premise. What evidence is actually being offered here? The advertisement tells us that most voters support the proposed curfew, right? It tells us that most voters support that. So that is a premise, right? Now ask the question, what does the advertisement want us to believe because of that premise? It wants us to believe it, therefore, the curfew is the best way to reduce the crime, right? That would be the conclusion that they want, right? So we have the premise. The premise is the first one, most people or most voters. And then the conclusion is therefore, excuse me on my handwriting, therefore the curfew is the best way to reduce crime. Now, again, notice something important. Even if the premise is completely true, even if the premise is completely true, even if most voters really do support this curfew, the fact alone that most voters are voting for this does not establish that the curfew is the best method for actually reducing the crime. Popularity and effectiveness are two different things. They're appealing to you on the basis of popularity, and we'll get to what that fallacy is in future videos. So when we analyze an argument, we need to first separate the evidence from the conclusion. Do not allow the word therefore to do the reasoning for you, right? Many people do in America, but don't allow that conclusion to do the work for you. Okay. Example number 2. The headline says after a city installed surveillance cameras, reported theft fell by 12%. The cameras caused the decline. Again, let's identify the argument. The evidence is that the city installed surveillance cameras. Afterward, reported theft decreased by 12%. So the conclusion is the cameras caused the decline. So that's the conclusion. Okay. The cameras caused the decline. That's basically what they're concluding. Now, the question is whether the evidence is sufficient, because the premise after a city stalled, that would be 1. Reportedly, theft fell. That would be number 2. Okay. The cameras caused the decline. And yes, you can have 2 premises, and those 2 premises are essentially supporting and carrying this conclusion. But again, the question is whether the evidence is sufficient to support the conclusion. We know 2 things that happen in sequence. We know that first they install the cameras, right? After a city installed the surveillance cameras, right? That's premise number 1. Then secondly, theft fell by 12%. So this would be premise number 1 and premise number 2. And then this would be the conclusion of the matter. But again, simply knowing that one event occurred before another event does not prove that the first event caused the second. Therefore, accepting the conclusion that they caused the cameras to, the cameras caused the decline in crime is not sufficient enough, because again, before accepting the conclusion, we want additional evidence. For example, were there other anti-theft programs introduced during the same period? Maybe that helped contribute to the cause in lower crime, right? Did police staffing change? Did you have more policing on staff at this time, or not? Did reporting procedures change? Was theft already declining before the cameras were installed? What happened in similar areas that did not install cameras? Those kinds of comparisons would help us determine whether the cameras were actually responsible for this change, rather than saying premise number 1, after they install the cameras, crime fell, and then leaving it at that. We need more evidence to support this strong conclusion that the cameras are the reason for that decline. So the important distinction is this: that sequence is evidence of timing. That's it. Sequence is evidence of timing. That's all. Okay. It's not automatically evidence of causation, right? Pause and try this problem. So the commentator says that either you support the military action or you do not care about national security, right? So again, the statement presents only 2 choices, right? Choice number 1, you support the military action, right? So this is choice number 1. Either you support the action, that's your first choice, or you do not care about national security. You only got 2 choices in this person's argument. You only have 2 choices. Either you support this action or you don't support it, right? But those are not necessarily the only possibilities. A person could care deeply about national security while disagreeing with this particular military action. You don't have to agree with every military action. For example, our taxpayer dollars are used to fund American wars all the time, and many Americans are vehemently against it. Why? Because it raises taxes, it raises rates, it causes it I mean, it literally causes the death of hundreds and thousands of people, American or otherwise. So many Americans don't support how America keeps going to war, but they're saying that either you support this military action or you do not care about national security. That there's more options than that. You can say that you don't support this military action while still caring about national security. A person can support a different strategy. You can you can believe the proposed action creates more risk than it eliminates. We're going to lose more soldiers and we're going to harm innocent civilians. You can also agree that the goal, you could agree with the goal, but disagree with their methodology. So the problem is that the statement compresses a larger range of possible positions. Okay. So they're limiting you to two options, but there are obviously more. Okay. So that's exactly why careful reasoning matters before accepting an either or statement, right? Before accepting an either or statement, you have to ask whether those really are the only alternatives. All right. Okay. Let's continue. Example number 3. So the prompt says that a viral video appears to show a public official announcing a new tax, but the post provides no original source, no date, and no link to the full speech. Okay. List the questions you should ask about the source, date, accuracy, hidden agenda, and big picture. Okay, so no original source, no date, no link. The PDF essentially asks us to examine 5 things, right? We are told to examine the source, the date, the accuracy, the hidden agenda, and the big picture. So first of all, when it comes to source, where did the video come from, right? Where did the video come from? Okay, that's one question I would ask. Where did the video come from? Is the public officials excuse me, is this the public official's verified account? Was it a government website? Was it a news organization? Or are we looking at a repost of a repost, right? Because people do that on social media all the time. It's like a repost of a repost. You got to verify it. Even when politicians post things, are they reposting things that were viral a long time ago and they're just reposting it? Okay, just because it's coming from a public official doesn't mean it's always the God honest truth. Okay. And then so there's obviously a lot of questions you can ask about source. You can ask about the date, right? When was the video recorded? Because a real video can still be misled if it is presented as current when it's actually several years old, right? People do that all the time. They post war videos and they're like, "Oh, look, this is what's going on over there in Iran. Iran just bombed an American base, but they might be taking images from an earlier encounter with Iran. So you got to be very careful where or when was the video recorded? Okay. When was the video recorded? That's a valid question. Accuracy. Does the clip accurately represent what the official said? So when someone makes a claim about the video and says, look at this video is proof of X. So your question is, does the clip actually support their claim? Was anything cut out before or after the statement? Can we locate the complete speech or even the original or official transcript? Because a short clip may be authentic while still creating an inaccurate expression. Because my question is, does it align with what is said? Okay. And then hidden agenda. My question is, why is this particular clip being shared, right? You always have to ask yourself this question. In a viral video, you have to ask yourself, why is the video being shared? Because people share things all the time. And you always got to think about motive. What is someone's motive for showing this video? Can you always discern someone's motive? Not necessarily, but is the person sharing it attempting to inform the audience? Is this an informative video? Is this video defamatory? Like, are they trying to persuade us? Are they trying to anger people? Are they trying to sell something? Are they trying to influence people in an election? The existence of an agenda does not automatically make the information false, but knowing the purpose will help us evaluate how that information is being presented. And then finally, the big picture, right? So you got the hidden agenda, then you got the big picture. The big picture is, what larger information do we need? Okay. Is there anything missing? Okay. Is there anything missing? How large is it? Has it actually been enacted? Was the official posting it describing someone else's proposal? The big question prevents us from drawing a major conclusion from a small piece of information, because you can take one video and amplify it and it becomes, you know, your analysis of it can be completely way out in left field. So we don't want to do that. But the five questions essentially are: who is the source? When did it happen? Is the information accurate? What agenda may have influenced the presentation? And what is the larger context? Those are the questions you need to ask yourself in any situation, just as a critical thinker. Okay. And this applies for every major, not just in mathematics, but biology, engineering. You always have to ask yourself these questions. What's the source? Where did it happen? Or excuse me, when did it happen? Is the information accurate? What agenda may have influenced the presentation, and what is the larger context? Now, example number 4. So we have report A. Report A says unemployment fell by 0.4% points, proving that the economy is strong. And then report B says millions remain unemployed, proving that the economy is failing. So notice what happened. Both reports may essentially be citing a true number, but each one immediately jumps from a number to a broad conclusion. Report A gives us a change. Unemployment fell by 0.4 percentage points, right? Then it concludes that the economy is strong, right? You see that leap there? And then report B, says millions remain unemployed. And then it says proving the economy is failing. Okay. So neither number standing by itself is enough to justify a broad conclusion, right? We know that the American economy has issues. That is unmistakable, right? But neither number standing by itself is enough to justify the broad conclusion. For a stronger analysis, we would need context. What was the unemployment rate previously? How was it calculated? How many people were considered in that study? Are jobs being gained or lost? Uh, so the larger lesson is, a statistic is simply evidence, right? A statistic is evidence. It's just evidence, but it's not automatically a conclusion. Okay. Okay. So you got to be careful. Stating these things is just evidence. You say unemployment fell by 4%, and then you jump to the broad conclusion of proving the economy is strong. Well, I'm sorry, sir, but stating a statistic is evidence, but it's not the conclusion of a matter, right? So you always got to be prepared. Listen to what people say. That will be an evidence, but sir, that would not be the conclusion of the matter. Okay, so you got to be really strong when it comes to your reasoning skills. so that you won't be deceived. A common mistake is, you know, an opinion is not automatically an argument. So when someone gives an opinion, you know, it could just be their opinion. A student says that I disagree with the policy, right? And just leaves it at that. The student says, I disagree with the policy. And then the student calls that an argument. But it's not yet an argument. What it is a position. Okay. This is a position. It's not an argument. Okay. It's an opinion. It's essentially his or the student's opinion. Okay. It's essentially their opinion. It may even function as a conclusion, right? I disagree with the policy. He could say so many other things, and then he says, I disagree with the policy. It could eventually become that, right? It eventually could function that way, but an argument requires support for this. Saying I disagree with it, but not providing any support for his argument, it just means that's your opinion, right? So I've done this with many people where they assume that when you give a counter argument for something and you prove them to be false, they'll say, "Well, that's just your opinion." That's not how logic works. See, logic is goes above someone's opinion because logic only deals with true and false. Either something is true or it's not true. There's no in between, right? It may again, this may even function as a conclusion, but we need at least one premise explaining why he disagrees. For example, imagine if he said that the policy increases a fee without providing any additional services. Oh, and then therefore I disagree with the policy. Okay, I'm with you on that because if let's just say you apply for Netflix, right, and you have a Netflix account, and then then Netflix says that we're going to raise your rate $10 and you know and it is what it is. Well, you say I disagree with the policy, but you need a little bit more. You can say, well, I'm disagreeing with the policy because of this, or the policy increases um my rate by $10 when there is no indication that the services are changing, therefore I disagree with the policy. That would be a more stronger argument. So you need premise leading to a conclusion in order for you to develop a strong argument system. Okay. So, again, this completes video one. The most important idea that I want you to take away from this lesson is do not confuse evidence with conclusion. When you encounter a persuasive claim, slow down that person's argument, identify their premise, identify their conclusion, and then ask whether the premise actually gives you enough support to reach that conclusion, and then complete the matching problems on your companion worksheet. Correct anything you missed, and then move on to video two after watching this lecture. And again, thank you for watching.